welcome to my channel today. It's a pleasure to have you all back. My name is Adobe, your online therapist, where we discuss simple psychology without the technical jargons. So, guys, today's topic is really interesting, and I'm still in the learning process, but I was so excited. I thought I might just to share. I've heard this several times from Thomas Sowell, the economist, Malcolm Gladwell talking about it, and this is a conversation I had with my mom the other day. And basically, it's about how your environment, genetics, and I'd call it ancestral struggle builds your personality. And when I mean personality, I mean builds your overall perception or attitude in life. I was discussing with my mother the other day how I'm Igbo of Nigerian descent, or basically, and it's like the fact that the Igbos that were produced after the Civil War are a lot stronger than many people in terms of being innovative, creative, because the ancestors of that period had to, reach out to ingenuity to survive. So the subsequent descendants, or the descendants of that period, they were born with that doggedness, with that survival instinct. Guys, so I'm so happy to talk about this subject that I want to talk about. How's your weekend? Hope everyone's doing great. Stay healthy, stay in touch as I always say. Don't forget, please seek the help of a licensed and professional therapist. So today's topic, I'm going to be talking about genetic inheritance. Yes, that is the psychological jargon for it. But really what I wanted to discuss is what are the things that you inherit, not just from your parents, but from your cultural, social group, from your ancestors, from your tribe, from your clan, kindred, and all that stuff. You see, oftentimes we just limit our studies or our understanding of genetic inheritance to just our parents, our grandparents, and basically in our lineage. But you see, you come from a herd, let me put it that way, a group, whether it's in your village or your nation, country, you come from a group, and I would like to call it herd. Remember when we talk of when the CDC and the WHO talk about herd immunity in terms of the coronavirus, it's like when enough of us have it, the rest of us gain immunity from that larger group. So basically, when it comes to herd immunity, that's how it applies. When enough of us have that immunity, the rest of us can then enjoy. Now, when it comes to genetic inheritance, they say you inherit your father's eye, your mother's nose, your grandma's look, and, your grandfather's intelligence, and so on. You see, what's missing from this is the group, the herd inheritance, the genetics of the group as a people. Now, a lot of times people look at the political melodrama of why Africans are not as advanced as the rest of the Western world. But not a lot of thought goes into the advantages of geography, exposure to other parts of the world, seaways, basically waterways, modes of transportation, openness to other cultures, and all that is past. Some ancestors of certain races or certain countries have had to move from one place to the other, usually moving for better. And there are two things, and I'm taking this from the book Applied Economics by Thomas Sowell, where he explained that hunter-gatherers and farmers, now these two types of civilization, or these two type of groups, became civilized in very different ways. You see, when you look at an oasis in a desert, there's a lot more activity and life force happening around an oasis than any other part in the desert. That's because something economically advantageous is around there to sustain life. Hunter-gatherers are very nomadic, constantly moving from one path to another, grazing and, searching in, hunting, and so on. That's hunters and gatherers. But you see, the farming population, they basically have to stay in a place much longer than the hunter-gatherers, okay? So if you look at communities that is why a lot of Western cultures thrived on agriculture when you talk about the Industrial Revolution, cotton, steam, and all that stuff that built, the steel industry. So what I'm trying to say is, first there's the environment, because the genes are not the only thing. We talk about nature versus nurture. Nature is your gene and nurture is the environment and other external influences that go into your experience. The gene, of course, is your temperament, what you come out with as an individual, and then how that temperament interacts with the environment, okay? So let's go back to the hunter-gatherer scenario, where those who are hunters and gatherers, they're not really interested in taking care of the environment. Not that they don't, but it's more like they're on the move. So they don't really have time for long-term plans in terms of a place to stay and, build. They're just seasonal migrators, let me put it that way. Once this season is done, once spring is done and winter's coming, they move. But you see, the agricultural groups, or nomads, if I should call them, not nomads, agricultural settlers, people who are more into farming and animal husbandry, basically trying to create a community. You see, if these hunter-gatherers were traveling and come upon the community of farmers, basically they could sell them their sheepskin, just sell stuff just to get the produce from these agricultural communities so they can move on. You see, and it is these agricultural communities that form civilizations, urban communities that grow into bigger, what they call it, settlements. Let me call that settlements, okay? So, and they both have their advantages, because these hunter-gatherers are the ones that move from culture to culture, from tribe and group to group, basically taken from one and putting it in another, and they're kind of colonizing the world by moving. So the agricultural community, they don't move as much, but they help form a settlement that grow into villages, to cities, and so on, even to become a nation, because have a large group of people settling. What if hunter-gatherers decide they no longer want to, travel, and they settle close to an agricultural community? This is how societies are formed, in his explanation, or to my understanding. So basically, when I'm talking about genetic inheritance, for a child born to hunter-gatherers versus a child born to the agricultural settlers, your skill sets are different, your temperament, your attitude, your resilience to situations, to specific situations. You see, imagine sailors, people born by the water. If your community or your tribe know how to, navigate the waterways compared to someone who was born close to the desert, you're going to have the skills and the attitude and the resilience of that environmental challenge, or should I say, the restrictions, the difficulties, basically the formidable opponents and things happening, the opportunities in your environment. If you feel like for hunter-gatherers, you could see them as opportunists, in the positive word of opportunists, not the negative part. But basically, they would be traders, because they can't just eat only goat and milk and survive. They need vegetables as well. So there's going to be a lot of trade. There's going to be a lot of their animals, giving it to the agricultural settlers to be able to plow their fields and so on. And if you look at the history of the world, horses are a thing of Arabian and Asian uh, roots, before they were brought to the Western Hemisphere. And if you look at Africa, we have a lot of beautiful rivers, but not very economical as things like the Madison, the Hudson River, and all that, the Missouri. You see, if you look at the history of the world, places that civilization really took off, they had great transportation and ability to relate with other parts of the world. Whereas those who are secluded, enclosed by mountains, like in an island, those who are shut up from the rest of the world, development took a lot longer. Now, that being said, when it comes to genetic inheritance, now I already said, depending on the struggles and the difficulties and the challenges your ancestors had to overcome, those are the skills that will be much more developed in you, whether you are of Nigerian descent like I am, of Igbo ancestry, living in America. You are still going to be born with those genetic evolutionary makeup. Now, when I talk about, if those who understand and who know Nigerian history must have come across what is called the Civil War, where the Igbos had to invent and practically improvise to survive. And if you look at it, that genetic what do I call it? That genetic makeup, that resilience, that ability to think and create. When they say necessity is the mother of invention, that ingenuity is born generations down the line because it has evolved as a survival mechanism. Okay, now it doesn't mean those in other parts of Nigeria, the northerners, the middle belt, the westerners, doesn't mean that they don't have resilience. They have it to the level to which they've been exposed in their struggle, in the difficulties. I mean, there are places that have suffered famine, there are places that have suffered drought, so the skills that are born into that community will be to be able to deal with the difficulties of the terrain. Now, if you then transplant or migrate away, you might have the advantage depending on, let's say, the exposure of the settling community you're entering. Okay, that's why a lot of people say, Chinese, Indians, Nigerians are good at STEM subjects more than the resident population. This is where I'm trying to put it, that when it comes to genetic inheritance, it's not that you're better than the resident population. It's just that you've developed to your resilience and your persistence because of something else. So that when you apply to something else, it looks as if you're an exceptional student. Meanwhile, you've been given the genetic advantage. Okay, when you look at the same goes also, referring to Thomas Sowell in his book, where he said, so what about the other countries? Malcolm Gladwell, speaking on a Microsoft Research expose, kind of a conference, said, if you look at people, especially, okay, how come the Chinese are very good at mathematics compared to Americans? Look at the history of the Chinese. Look at their struggle. Look at their story. Look at their ancestry. You'd see that a lot of what they have had to go through had made them develop a certain level of resilience, a certain level of focus, of prioritization, and all that conservation of energy, and putting in that atmosphere. And if you look at it, they have they seem to be a lot of wealthy Chinese people, because they have been through some really hard stuff that it's like it became a culture. Savings culture was a thing, as a survival thing, not necessarily financial intelligence, but it was a necessary survival skill to be able to save, so that, when there's war or famine or food shortages, you would have something saved. Okay, so that now translates into a society of abundance, but there are a lot of billionaires in saving. Okay, so when you talk about genetic, when I'm talking about genetic inheritance, there is a psychological definition, but I just wanted to kind of enjoy the expansion of how this applies to so many things. Okay, you talk about whether it's finance, whether it's technology, whether it's medicine. If you look at the development across nations, across centuries, you can see that those whose ancestors, let me put violent, they, as much as they don't have to wage wars now, they come off as aggressive. Okay, those whose ancestors are, didn't have to struggle, they come off as meek or even weak. It's not that the gene is solely responsible. Don't forget, each individual will always, will often, if not more than often, be tailored to their environmental experience. Environment is so many ways. Environment is family, environment is country, environment is opportunities open to the individual. Okay, so when we come to when I talk about genetic inheritance, it's not that some people are lucky and some people are not lucky. Okay, when if you look at the most very advanced societies, and when I mean advanced in terms of technology, not necessarily culture, you would see that a lot of the cultures that are very advanced and developed and open are those whose ancestors were open to traveling, open to migrants settling with them and traveling, open to trade and business, versus those who are kind of reserved. Let's take Western and Eastern Germany, for instance. Western Germany is a highly evolved society in terms of wealth compared to Eastern Germany. If you recall the times of the German Revolution and all that, before the Berlin Wall came down and people could pass between the east and west of Germany, the eastern part of Germany was not open to outside and international interaction. So you could see that any country where there's a slow uptake of globalization, there is also a slow development generally. In terms of economic power, in terms of political prowess, in terms of science and technology, it's being able to interact gives you an advantage. Being born to that herd, to that community of people who are open, who are adventurous, curious, it also comes into your genes, such that even if you don't want to travel or do all that, you would be seen as the life of the party. You would be seen as the outgoing, curious, adventurous, naughty child in the family. Okay? But temperaments also shape all this, and because temperament kind of determines how every child views the world. A child with a lot of melancholy is going to see a lot of negativity in the world. A sanguine is always going to see yellow lights, bright lights sparkle, and that's how they see the world. So I really hope you can do a lot more research. This is a very interesting topic. I enjoyed reading it. I'm still reading up on it. So by all means, go ahead, do your research and let me know, because this stuff is amazing, guys. All right, I will see you in my next video. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Drink responsibly.